a role in your journey as a wedding planner, event planner? Like, how big was fake for you?
It definitely plays a role because I think for myself, and I don't know how many people who listen to this podcast are African or who are immigrants, but my parents are immigrants and they did a lot to come here, to give us, everything, you know. Funny enough, I'm the first child. When I told them I wanted to go into engineering, they didn't want me to because they were like, "Oh, everything's getting outsourced to China," But that's not entirely true. So they were nervous about me going down that path. They just wanted me to be a doctor at first. But once they started seeing me get internships and stuff, and they started seeing like, "Oh, you could really have success as an engineer," then they were excited about it. And then literally, that's what all my brothers did as well, and still do. And we all kind of went down that path, and they were happy with it. So it's kind of hard. I did happen to go to, like an Ivy League school, all of that, to do all of that and then graduate and be like, I want to plan events, like, it's just like, it's a very, it almost, when I told my parents that, I was nervous because I was just like, it feels like I'm throwing all of this away, all of this that they've invested into me and all of the expectations that they wanted for me. It feels like I'm just throwing it away. So it's not, for me, it's not something that I went into lightly. And it also isn't something, to be transparent, that I just went into and just quit my job and jumped into event planning, because I don't think that's wise. That's actually why a lot of businesses die, because people think the first step to starting a business is quitting your job.
Yeah.
It's like the first step is actually figuring out how to make money and figuring out how to market yourself and all that, which you can do while having a job, because it takes a while. Most businesses take 3 years to be profitable, 3 to break even. So if the first thing you do is quit your job, what are you doing for the next 3 years? I mean, if you're happy to live at home with your parents for the next 3 years, no traveling, no extra spending money, then that's cool. Or if you're married and your spouse will support you, that's fine. Otherwise, that's not the first step to starting a business, right? So for myself, that wasn't even my concern. My concern wasn't even, oh, like whatever. It was just, I was nervous about what my parents would feel about the fact that we'd had all those arguments about me becoming an engineer instead of a doctor, and they invested all this money in my education and all that. And now I'm saying I want to do something else. But the funny thing is that my parents actually were cool with it. My dad, the only thing he said was just, give yourself at least 2 years before you quit your job, because for the same reasons that I just said. But they were just like, try things, life is too short to always wonder what would have been. So for me, the reason I'm starting with all this, when you asked me, did faith play a role? I was scared when I had that initial epiphany of, oh, if money wasn't an issue, I would be an event planner. But then I was like, but I would be broke. So it was like, I was afraid. I was like, there's no point in pursuing this. And of course, for me, the next step to pursuing it was, for me, not everybody needs, I'm not saying everybody needs to go to NYU or whatever, but for me, that was the right next step for me, because I was 23 years old. And I probably look 23 right now. Like, I still have a baby face. Who's gonna hire me with no events experience, or at least I thought I had no events experience. I later realized I did, from all the things I had been doing prior. But who's gonna hire me this young? Like, I need something under my belt. And so I wanted that certification, which meant I was gonna spend more money, right? Spend money out of my pocket to get this certification, spend extra time on evenings and weekends to go to school and all this. And so it was just like, is this the right decision? Am I wasting time? Am I wasting money? I had all these fears. But the truth is that when I prayed about it, I had peace. And I think that the truth is that when there's sometimes that God will tell you, do this. And there's sometimes that God will allow you to do things. And I think that this was a case of God allowing me to do it. It wasn't a case where God was like, or maybe it was God telling me to do it, because I really was unsettled. When I say at that period, when I realized, when that pageant was, that event was over, I was very unsettled for months. For a few months, like, I was very unhappy, and it took me a long time to figure out why. Like, there was something on the inside that was just like, and it just took me a while to unpack my feelings, understand what was going on. And when I finally decided I was going to move forward, like, okay, let me enroll in NYU, that was when I started having peace again. And so for me, it was just like, okay, let me follow God. Um, there's a there's a scripture that says, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And there's a guest pastor at my church once said, goodness and mercy can't follow if you're not moving. And so it was one of those things where it was just like, I felt like God allowed me to explore this, And in retrospect, I really feel like God kind of led me down this path. It wasn't even like whatever, because especially with everything I was feeling on the inside, it was a lot. And I think that I was really getting to understand who God was. I was really getting to understand what it sounded like for God to speak to me. Because when I gave my life to Christ, there was no altar call on the day I gave my life to Christ. It was just, for whatever reason, it was a very long, extended worship session. Like I said, I hadn't graduated from college too long before that. So I actually was coming from my homecoming. So I was in Philadelphia, and the whole time I was there, everything kept telling me like, you need to take the first bus, the first bus on Sunday morning out and go to church. And I didn't know why, because it's not like church was going anywhere, but it was just, it was my desire. It wasn't even like, it was just my desire to be there. And I didn't know why. So I just started to follow it, you know. It was even my desire to find a church, and I didn't know why, because like I said, I hadn't given my life to Christ yet.
Yeah.
So it was, I started learning what it meant to follow these desires and see what happens from it. So it wasn't like me choosing to become an event planner was the first time that I learned to listen to God's voice. I was learning it. So I was getting more comfortable with it. And it's just something that, you know, I've kind of learned over time, that sometimes you do kind of have to step out. Sometimes God, you know, wants you to move. Like there are even sometimes in the Bible where Moses was crying out to God, and God's like, why are you crying out to me? Use the staff that's in your hand. Like that was his response. And to me, I'm like, well, I mean, he's asking you for help, but it's just like sometimes God is like, don't ask me. Use what's in your hand, right? Try it, give it a try, and know that I will be with you. And so that for me was kind of where where faith took a, you know, played a part. And I think that if I had not given my life to Christ prior to all of this happening, I probably would have been confused, and I probably would have never tried it, to be honest. I probably would have been like, oh, this is crazy. This is a crazy idea. Let me just ignore it. And then now 10 years later, probably miserable and wondering, you know, what would have been if I had never tried it, right? I would have not had the courage to try it.
That's pretty interesting. So I guess you mentioned your oldest child, you're female. So how would you like encourage, you know, a young girl, a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur, whether it's when to plan or how to go about, especially in this kind of age?
Yeah, no, I would definitely say, you know, for young girls or guys, you know, I think the advice would be pretty much the same, you know, for me, because again, I'm also the only girl. So the people I give advice to in my family are all men. But you know, I do feel that one thing I've heard over and over again, which I didn't see it that way at the time that I was doing it, but I've heard over and over again when people say, I like the fact that you had the courage to pursue what you wanted. And I've heard it so many times. And then I also see so many times where people are very unhappy in their jobs, which is honestly, there are times I'm unhappy in my business too. So even though this, like, there's a lot of times people think like, you know, entrepreneurship is all rosy, but it's not. Like, you're everything. You are the accounting office, the marketing department, you know, you are everything. So there are going to be parts of that you don't like. So it's never perfect or rosy on any side. But I'm just saying that there are people who maybe are not necessarily fully fulfilled in their jobs or in their lives, because I don't think all fulfillment comes from what you do. It comes from your family, it comes from your hobbies, it comes from all that. I don't think what you do should be the center of your life. But I think I've heard so many times where people say, I love the fact that you had the courage to go after what you wanted. And I never saw it that way, largely because for the majority of the time, I also had a job. I had a job and a business for the majority of the time that I've been doing this, you know. But it's crazy that in the midst of that, and I wouldn't say that I talk about it all the time, like, because I don't treat my business like a side hustle. So because of that, it's not like, you know, I never treat it like a side hustle. And I don't like when people do. There's some people who are full-time who treat their businesses like side hustles. So that's a whole nother thing. It's more a frame of mind than anything else. But I feel that would be it. I would say never be afraid to try new things, because the truth of the matter, which is one thing that I don't feel like people talk about enough. It's something that I learned in IT consulting, largely because when you join a consulting firm, when you first join, you don't specialize in anything. But over time, the more you do certain things, the more you get pigeonholed into that, right? You start and you're you know, it's the first year and you're a general analyst. Then people start to notice, okay, you're really good at testing, right? So then they promote you to be the manager of a bunch of testers, or consultant over a bunch of testers. Then they promote you to be a man. And then next thing you know, you're always going to be a tester.
Yeah.
You're pigeonholed into that thing. It's very difficult to switch from being a manager of testers to being a manager of developers, because people are always going to question, do you understand development enough? Because you spent all these years testing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's the same thing with us in life. So It's not that you can't switch, you absolutely can. But when you start to have those curiosities, there's nothing wrong with exploring it. There's nothing wrong, because the truth is you can explore it and hate it. Some years ago, because for me, I always knew, I never felt like, oh, I want to be like in my 60s and 70s still planning events, right? Like I would love to be in the events industry in a different format, but I don't know if a 60-year-old, weddings are trendy, it's a little different when you're at that age, being an event planner. So there was a time that I said, okay, let me buy some chairs. I invested over what, 12,000 whatever dollars to order Shivari chairs, which are like rental chairs, what a lot of people want for weddings, from China. And I had them in my own stock. And I said, I'm going to start with this. What's most requested is gold Shivari chairs. So I'm going to buy a whole bunch of gold Shivari chairs, have them, start renting them out, and just see what happens. And it was horrible. I hated it. And the thing is that it seems so simple that you have products, you ship them out, you stack them, you put it back. It seems so simple, but it was so hard because I would hire people to help me. They didn't understand. They wouldn't listen when I say stack them in stacks of 6 so it fits. They wouldn't want to listen. So now they decided to do stacks of 4. And then after the fact, they realized, oh, it's not going to fit in the truck. So now we got to do it over again. Like dealing with different things, dealing with all the cleaning, having to clean everything, dealing with the storage unit that's only open at certain times, like all these things. And I started to realize, yeah, I can't do this. This is not going to last. So I probably rented Shivari chairs for it took me about 6 or 8 months to even get the chairs in the first place because of customs and all these different things. By the time I started renting it, I only lasted a month and a half. And I was just like, I'm selling it. I'm selling everything. I don't even want this anymore. I don't even want it. And I sold it, and I was happy with I sold it to 2 small venues, and they were very appreciative because what I sold my chairs to them is way cheaper than what they would have gotten it anywhere else. Although I got my money back, but I wasn't trying to I was just trying to get rid of it. I wasn't trying to make more money off of it. I was very happy with the way everything ended. I didn't lose anything. I didn't lose any money. I didn't, whatever. And I feel good about where I sold the chairs and everything. But I went down the path. I learned it wasn't for me, and I left. Nobody died. Like, doesn't create, and even if I did lose a couple $1,000s, yes, that's real money, but, that's part of the journey of entrepreneurship, because I have lost money on things in the past that I thought were going to bring me money, right? So it's like, it's part of the journey. And so I feel that a lot of times we're so afraid, especially people who are high achievers, especially people who have always gotten straight A's because they've always done the right thing. It becomes difficult to explore. And I was never that person who got straight A's. Started from middle schools, I stopped getting straight A's. Many A's, but definitely I'm not saying that to myself, but there are other people, I think the reason they struggle is that they've always made the right choice. But when it comes to life, the right choice isn't black or white. It depends on the person. And if you struggle with understanding yourself and understanding where you're trying to go, that can be hard. And you end up doing what everybody expects you to be, which is just climbing the corporate ladder, which could be good. But are you climbing the right corporate ladder? Are you in marketing when you should be in tech? Or are you in, all those sorts of things. So I would definitely say when you have those curiosities, pray about it and explore them, because the answer will lie there. And if you trust yourself enough, and if you are open to what God is saying to you, you'll learn quickly if you should continue down that path or leave.